with myself, Lisa Dorsey, and Patrick McCoy. Are there any comments, suggestions, petitions by residents in attendance regarding any items not on the agenda? Let's move to discussion items number 3. 3A, the May 2022 Building and Housing Monthly Report.
Thank you. As normal, give you our item of interest update. Melton Center project's going fairly well over there. We have begun our final inspections. I've started on the main apartment building. It's going well. They do have some things to correct, but they're working essentially around the clock over there to get things done. So their hope is to have residents moving in there by June 20th. I think it's a bit ambitious, but we'll see. We'll do everything we can to work with them and help them meet their deadlines. But I have been over there a lot this week. I'll be over there all day tomorrow, for the entire day, trying to get inspections done. We still have to do all the site inspections, though. We have not conducted any of that with our engineer, but we will continue to work on those for probably the next couple of weeks. Davis Oil, we do know that the property settled. Property was sold. New buyer. They transferred the property. They did have an agreement of sale. And in the agreement of sale, they were required to file for demolition permits within 14 days of settlement. That didn't happen. We don't know why it didn't happen. The borough solicitor is going to be contacting their attorney to see what's going on. Borough staff does have a meeting set up with the buyer on June 17th to discuss prospective uses of the property. We don't know if they were delaying the demo permit because of that meeting. We're not sure. We don't want to speculate, but we're hoping that they can get those demolition permits into us soon and get those buildings down. I mean, it's been long enough, so we're itching to get rid of those buildings there. But we do have good movement. At least we have the biggest piece of the puzzle in place, is the property being sold. They did complete their asbestos abatement of the property, so that's a plus. So they can move forward with demolition once we approve. Building and Housing Department staffing, have been experiencing some staffing issues lately. We did have a code enforcement officer leave last month, so we have been down a position. We're hoping to fill that soon. We do have an interview with somebody tomorrow. We'll see how that goes, but definitely want to find the right person to fill that position. But staff is working hard to make sure community needs are met and complaints are responded to. So we'll continue to do that even when we're short-staffed. We did have a good month though for building permits. We did issue 54 permits and almost $86,000 in fees for that month. We did have a couple of large projects come in that were large dollar value projects. Did issue 62 trash tickets in the month. It's pretty good, was up. And for being short staffed, those numbers are pretty high. We did 84 rental inspections, dwelling unit inspections, and I conducted 20 building inspections in that month. Handled 10 complaints and issued 3 citations in the month. Clearly, we didn't issue any snow tickets for the month. But with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions? No. Do you have anything else? Okay. Item B, the presentation by Jim Wiley of the Sustainability Committee on a proposed concept for solar and EV ready ordinances.
Hi, folks. My name is Jim Wiley. I'm the Vice Chair of the Borough Sustainability Committee. This is a proposal, discussion material that I drafted, but it was reviewed and improved by the Sustainability Committee, and Will Williams suggested I start with a discussion with you guys. Next slide, please. So just some basic common sense thing. I think you'll agree that it's more cost effective to do some things at construction time rather than after the fact. So the industry has shown that two of those things are putting solar on, making sure your roof can handle the load of solar panels, for instance, and we'll get into that. And same with EV charging. To put it in a little thought at construction time is going to save the owner of the building a lot of money down the road when he wants to do either of those things. Here's a quote from, I'm going to talk about both solar and then EV charging. I think EV charging deserves more time because I think that's coming at us whether we're ready for it or not as people are transitioning to electric vehicles. Here's a quote from Brian O'Leary, the Chester County Planning Commission Director. Existing structures and parking areas should be our top priority for solar siting in Chester County. The point being, before we start using up farmland or productive land, let's try to squeeze as much as we can out of rooftops and parking spaces. And that's where urban areas like Westchester comes in. Next slide, please. Oh, this is what I read. Next slide. So here's what solar ready means. Solar ready means that roofs should be able to handle the weight of panels and any forces due to wind or snow on the panels. Rooftops should be properly angled so that any slope is toward the south or southish, or flat with no shading. And then some other bullet points there are commonly seen in solar ready ordinances. Materials should be that are on the roof should be grouped together so you have as big an open space as you can to put panels. Considerations for connecting panels to the ground, inverter electrical wiring, and then perspective roof area should not be permanently shaded. All right, next slide, please. So my suggestions of what the borough could do, we could, go slow, go really slow, engage with stakeholders. Stakeholders here being developers and Kevin Gore, put out a survey with developers and solar installers and maybe have a hearing to get input. Another thing we could do is draft a resolution that clearly states our goals and our strategies for promoting more solar in the borough. Maybe set a goal of increasing by 10% over the next 10 years. State our intention to require new construction be solar ready by some year that we pick. Call for proposals for solar canopies on borough maintained parking areas. Review production and performance of the Chestnut Street garage canopy. See how we think that's done over the last, I think it's been like 15 years now. And then perhaps hold a public hearing. And then finally, we could consider doing an ordinance requiring new construction and major renovations to be solar ready or updates to our zoning specs. All right, then I was going to get into EVs unless there's a question about solar ready.
The new construction, that would be both residential and commercial, correct?
Yes. I mean, the borough can do whatever it wants, but that's what we're proposing here. Okay, next slide, please. So the Westchester Area Clean Energy Future Team, which is made up of 6 municipalities, their EACs and SACs collaborating to do the community engagement as far as clean energy transition goes. We did a survey on EVs, an EV survey, and this is more than just the borough, but the responses that we got were more than half said that they planned their next vehicle would either be an EV or might be an EV. So, people are thinking about this, especially with the prices of gas as they are. Next slide, please. So what does EV ready mean? There's kind of 3 levels of EV readiness. The first is EV capable, which means we have the electrical panel capacity and branch circuits and raceways going to the parking areas. EV ready means what I just mentioned, plus an actual 240-volt outlet near the area of where a charger would be. And then there's EV installed, which means you have the actual chargers in the parking spaces. So the municipality could define how many parking spaces need to be EV capable or EV ready or installed in zoning or through variance agreements. Next slide, please. So I see our options as, again, the go slow approach, update our green building certification checklist. We should do that no matter what. Just to put that on there. We could draft a resolution setting our goals and strategies for promoting EV acceptance in the borough. Our goal to increase, again, the 10% acceptance per year for 10 years. Intent to require new construction to have at least 10% of spaces be EV ready and at least one space per building. Public parking areas should have one EV charger, and these are, just my suggestions, right? Public parking areas will have one EV charger for every 20 spaces by 2030. Explore curbside parking options for residents, and consider a pilot program. Require multifamily residences to have 50% of parking spaces, have at least an L1, so a 110 outlet, which is better than nothing, and 10% have L2 chargers by 2030. And I'm saying that about existing multifamily. Establish schedule for transition the borough and police fleets to plug-in vehicles and develop a stakeholder survey and host a public meeting. Next slide, please. So there's more options. We could, draft an ordinance for new construction and major renovations and set different requirements for readiness and EV capable for, single family homes, multifamily homes, and commercial sites. Number 4 is ordinance for existing multifamily facilities, and make up some numbers about what we'd like to see. And then finally, a resolution establishing a pilot program to explore options for curbside charging. I think of my last slide, also in the EV survey, we had a question about if you do not have off-street parking, would you consider buying an EV? And predominantly the answer was no. Right? So that's a barrier. If you don't have off-street parking and you can't charge at home, that's something that's inhibits the transition to EVs, which pretty soon, if not already, are going to be the economical solution for transportation.
How much does an EV charging station, how much would that cost an individual when you regarding to that ordinance, for existing homeowners?
Yeah, I think for homeowners, there's kind of two parts to it. There's getting the 240 volts to your garage or wherever you're going to plug in. So that's kind of mostly labor of getting that circuitry. And then it depends on whether you got the panel capacity, or you have to up from 100 to 200 amps or whatever. And then the unit itself is not much. I'm going to say between 2,000 and 4,000. I've seen quotes from Honeybrook Township, and they were budgeting like 10,000 for two, so like 5,000 per.
They still have the tax credits for that. Is that correct too?
There are tax credits and there are incentives. I believe they apply to both municipalities and residential from the Volkswagen settlement. Yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Quick question. Do we, and maybe this is for Mr. Metrick, or you may know, Mr. Wiley, do we have any charging stations in our public parking garages or spaces?
Absolutely. Right. So the one out here by the door is available when employees aren't working. In Chestnut Street Garage is actually, there's a sign out front that you can charge there that uses solar energy because the panels are on top of the garage, right? I think that's all for, there's one on High Street, right?
So how many, is it just one in Chestnut Street? How many are in Chestnut Street? Does anybody know?
Just one.
Just the one. So we have 3 in the borough. What would you say is the low hanging fruit here? Like, what would be the first thing we could do to have an impact?
Yeah, if you want to go slow, I would suggest, crafting a resolution to kind of state our intents and see what kind of feedback we get. Solicit input from stakeholders, hold a public meeting, talk about it. That's the go slow approach. I mean, this is a long-term discussion I want to have with you guys. I kind of get your advice on how to help, who to talk to. If you're ready to draft an ordinance, I'd be happy to do that. I've got links to several other towns, cities' ordinances that we can pull from.
So we appreciate all the work. This is great information, right, that Mr. Wiley and the Sustainability Committee put together. At this point, my recommendation is to allow us to take a look at it at the staff level so we can gather some information, just so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are other towns or cities who have ordinances in place that maybe we can look at, steal some ideas from. And there's also model codes already in place. The International Code Council has a wealth of information on solar and EV codes that we can utilize. So I would like to take some time to sit down with Will Williams so we can take a look at all that information and then work with the Sustainability Committee to come back with an action plan, or at least more of a crafted idea of what we want to put into an ordinance.
I think that makes the best sense. And then, we could start with the resolution, as you mentioned, Jim, after the recommendations that you have, and then move forward from there.
Mr. Gore, if you were to put like a time frame around that, what would you, 3 months, 6 months?
6 months.
Any further questions?
Yeah, I have just a question. Do we have any statistics in terms of the existing charging stations that we have? How utilized are they? Do we have a number of, estimated number of owners that have vehicles of the 20,000 residents?
Scrambling here to pull up a spreadsheet I haven't looked at in a few months, to be perfectly honest. But I think part of the utilization rate was very low. And that's been why we haven't pursued more public charging accessibility. But at the same time, it's sort of chicken and the egg, right? And the other thing is, up until a short while ago, we had 250 gas, where it's a whole different world right now. So I think we've had some plans to, roll out 1 to 2 per year in public spaces. It would be, I think, a midterm goal would be to have, something accessible in a short walking distance to, every resident in the borough. We have a number of public facilities, parks, municipal buildings. No one really lives more than 3 or 4 blocks away from an existing electrical service that we already own. So that could be a tangible sort of midterm goal. But, I think pre-pandemic, going back to my data here, we had a utilization rate of about 20 to 25%. So of all the hours in a given year, someone was plugged in about 20, 25% of the time. So from that point of view, that's what I mean. It's hard to justify. The 5 to 10,000 is a good benchmark for a commercial level 2 charger, and a little bit of installation costs and electrical infrastructure there. So it's kind of hard to justify that with that utilization rate. But I'm looking I haven't updated this in 3 or 4 months, so
Yeah, it's okay. I just
Yeah.
wanted to get just an overall, all sense. I mean, I agree that taking a short step, and I'd rather, I think, in the short term, see more of a way to incentivize people to do it as opposed to putting it in an ordinance, just to see how utilized is it.
yeah, I think this is really powerful information here. We have what we call garage orphans in the borough, people that don't have, a lot of people don't have off-street parking. We also have a transient rental population that isn't going to, even if, they might have the electrical capacity, they can go to Amazon and have a $500 charger delivered tomorrow. You're not going to do that if you're on a 1-year lease and, you don't know where you're going to live in 2 or 3 years. And that's 65% of our housing units are rentals. So that's another barrier. And then I think with that in mind, it's a question of, is this something that the borough wants to take ownership of and, own and operate these because there are maintenance expenses? Or are we going to let the public and the private sector figure it out? There's no right answer there. It's more of a philosophical question.
So just to be clear, what I was proposing is enabling policy that would inspire charging at home, not charging in public. As this slide shows, people want to charge at home at like 22 miles an hour. That's my EV charges in an L2 charger. To get charged up for the week, I would have to leave it here 10 hours, 12 hours, right? So that's not convenient for me. That's not convenient for most people. It's great while you're coming to dinner to be able to charge. That'll get you enough to drive back home. But what we really need to do is encourage or enable people so that they can more easily charge where they live.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, action items, approve the May 2021 Smart Growth minutes. Any objections to that? No. Action item B, approve 501 Hannum Ave preliminary and land development plan. Mr. Gore?
Yeah, thank you. So the applicant and their engineer is here tonight. This application did receive a favorable recommendation from the Planning Commission for preliminary approval. The applicant is proposing to construct a 1-story office building there on the existing site, which will house the orthodontist office. They do have zoning relief for this site. They did receive zoning relief for the minimum front yard setback and also for the required number of parking spaces. So that is accounted for on the plan. They're also requesting 3 waivers, which the Planning Commission did support. One waiver is to allow the existing right-of-way to remain unchanged. And because they're not doing any work with the existing roads there. They are adding a driveway entrance, but they're not affecting that right-of-way width. The second waiver is to request to allow the site triangle to be 55 feet rather than 75 feet on West Washington Street. This waiver was supported by the traffic engineer, so we don't see any reason to deny that waiver request. And the third waiver is to allow for the construction of the 50-foot non-disturb area, disturbance area to 11.25 feet, which this is the riparian buffer that's in the back. There's a stream that runs along the back of the property. Jeff. So none of the work is in the actual regulated floodplain. However, there is a stream that runs back there, Taylor's Run, and the This site and the neighboring property was part of a previous land development approval, and the prior riparian buffer was established at 11.25 feet. And in discussions with borough staff and borough engineer, we did agree that it could remain at that 11.25 feet. The borough also is planning on doing a stream restoration project in the back there, and we are working with the applicant to come up with a plan and an easement agreement for that work that we're going to be doing there. At this time, I'll turn it over to Joe Rosella, the applicant's engineer, to answer any questions and give a more detailed presentation of the project.
Good evening, council members. I'm Joe Rosella with DL Howe and Associates, the civil engineer for the project. And as Kevin said, we've been working on this project since August of last year, where we approached the Planning Commission and Smart Growth Council and Borough Council, as well as the Zoning Hearing Board for the variance relief. So been developing the project over time. This is the former site of the Polyclean Laundromat. Laundromat has been demolished, and the applicant has already started some of the work associated with cleaning the stream bank, cleaning out a lot of debris, old engine parts and carts and old trees, things like that, just to help with the revitalize the stream. In conjunction with that, it was the development of the plan, which is a 6,000 square foot office building, primarily for the orthodontist use. And Dr. Farrell currently is has a business in the borough, and she's been looking for some time to find this spot, which is the western gateway into the borough. So we've gone through a lot of development of the plan to create a very interesting site to meet all of the borough requirements with sidewalk and enhance the streetscape and the street lights, just to make this a really attractive property. She's very excited to remain in the borough. We've as Kevin said, we've complied with all of the consultant review comments. This is for preliminary approval, and along with the 3 waivers, that's really an oversight of the project, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
I don't have any questions. I did see the renderings. The building looks very nice, so.
One question, yeah, looks great. The fee in lieu of the open space, where does that stand at this point?
Yeah, we're going to pay the fee in lieu of open space, the calculation based upon the square footage of the building. Initially, we had thought that we could utilize some of the ground on the north side of the stream, but a good point that Kevin made, and it's really difficult to get to. So there's no sense trying to qualify it, and we would just pay the fee based upon the building size.
No questions. I think call it 3-0. We're good?
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time this evening.
All right, action item C, number 1, recommendation for the solicitor to attendance on 996 500 West Gay Street.
So for the first application, 500 West Gay Street, this is for, this is dimensional variance for a rear yard setback for an addition. My recommendation for this application would be not to send the solicitor to oppose this one.
Okay.
For the second application, 26 West Union, this is not a simple dimensional variance. This person is seeking a use variance. They are also appealing the decision of the zoning officer, and they are also seeking a variance from the notice of violation they received for using the property as a what we call an Airbnb or a short-term rental. It's not permitted under our zoning ordinance. They did receive a notice of violation. And I would recommend that we do send the solicitor to oppose this application for the use variance.
Any questions?
Yeah, so the building was recently bought. There's 3 units in that building. The prior owner rented 2 of them out, lived in the third. The new owner rents the 2 out and rents the third unit out as a short-term rental or Airbnb, as they're commonly referred to. Their application is somewhat incorrect, but they did add the correct language in there. They're not able to receive a special exception for a bed and breakfast at that property because they do not meet the special exception criteria. They then need to obtain a variance. So they're seeking a variance. So first, they're appealing the decision of the zoning officer, which was the notice of violation we sent them. They are also, they're appealing the decision and then in the alternative seeking the variance if they are not approved on the appeal of the decision, the notice of violation. That's what they're doing right now. Yeah, no, if they were successful in their appeal to the zoning hearing board, they could continue to use it as this Airbnb without living there, and it's not going to meet those requirements of the bed and breakfast. Our point is that, one, it doesn't meet the requirements of a bed and breakfast per our ordinance, and 2, you're not allowed to use residential properties for a transient use. So-
I'm fine with that recommendation, sending out the solicitor there. Comments?
Just trying to understand. So they rent 2 of the units out. So rent 2 of the units, but they can't rent the third even if it's on short term? I mean, short Airbnbs are rentals, just like the other 2 are, but they're shorter duration. They're not bed and breakfasts. Airbnbs are not bed and breakfasts. So I was just trying to understand. They rent 2 of them out, is that correct?
That's correct. That's my understanding.
Okay. They don't live there, so they long-term rent 2, and they short-term have rented the 1 unit that you fined them for, correct?
We didn't find anybody. We sent them a notice of violation to stop the illegal use.
Right, okay. You sent them you're the zoning officer that they're appealing, correct? Okay. So they do rent 2, but they can't rent the third as a Airbnb. But if someone were to live there long-term as a rental unit, they could do that. Would that be a correct statement?
Clarify so things aren't getting thrown out of proportion here. So I don't know, however you want to word Airbnb is not a bed and breakfast. It's an Airbnb, okay. So the definition of a dwelling unit does not include a hotel, and a hotel is defined as a transient use. So regardless if they were using it as a bed and breakfast or any other type of short-term rental through a lease agreement, it wouldn't be permitted based on the definition of dwelling unit because it doesn't allow for the transient use of that property, which an Airbnb is a transient use. If they met the criteria, but because they don't meet that criteria, they have to get a variance.
And just for the record, what could transient use be defined as?
Transient use, I believe, is less than 30 days.
So this opened up a whole can of worms. So you could have like a month-to-month lease, right? So a month-to-month lease is essentially 30 days. So you can,
Right, so that would be permissible because it's 30 days or more,
okay. And
unless if it's February, I guess.
I had another question that's gone.
Any other questions about item B? Okay. Motion to adjourn at 7:06.